Hi everybody, in this video I am doing my best friend Christy's makeup, and I want to do this video to show everybody how I approach getting that really nice clean skin base. I'm not going to really be doing eyes, just mainly face, cheeks, lips, a little bit in the brows, but this is not really a full face of makeup as far as, everything is being done here. What I am starting with, you saw that I just put on a light hydrating moisturizer. I used one from Laneige. I don't want to over prep the skin. Christy actually has a tiny bit more, little bit more oily skin through the center of her face, so I don't want to do anything that's too heavy. Then I went in with an eye cream from Oliveda, and I worked it under the eyes for some extra hydration and just used the extra that was on my fingers to rub in through the rest of the face. So from there, I'm just kind of feeling her skin and seeing how the moisturizer is soaking in, and that's going to prep me for my next move here, which is giving her a nice glowing under base. This is the e.l.f. Halo Glow in color number 1. I like to apply this first if I'm doing that really kind of lit from within type of look on my clients. So I'm applying it with a brush. I use color number 1 on her because it's pretty fair. I think they make a color 0, which is even lighter, but I like color number 1. I use that. 1, 2, 3.5, 4, and 5 are the colors that I keep in my kit. So I'm stippling that on and just making sure it's really blended in well. With makeup, you just want to make sure you're using thin layers of all of your products. I get that really nice skin look by using small amounts of product, really stippling it in, making sure it's really well blended, and making sure I do each of these steps before moving on to the next step. You'll never see me applying lots of product right to the face because only so much product can actually blend in. If you're using multiple different products, they have to be able to layer with each other. So here I am just making sure that all of that's blended in, and I'm going to be moving on to my next product here shortly. I'm still just blending in the very last little bits of that e.l.f. Halo Glow. And you'll see that I kind of spend a lot of time on each step, making sure everything's really worked into the skin. So here I'm testing the foundation shade on her chin. Christy's more fair. I would say she's got a cooler undertone, but not a cool undertone that's really super blue. She's a little more violet undertone, but most of the foundations that I use in my kit lean neutral or even slightly warm. So for her, I'm mixing a couple different foundations, and then I'm also going to be adding a violet color corrector. The foundations that I'm using is a mix of number 1.5 and 3 in the Face Atelier Ultra Foundation, and then a few drops of Temp 2 Violet Corrector. The violet corrector and the blue corrector, I would say, are probably the two I use the most. In deeper skin tones, I'll use the yellow, the red, and sometimes for really fair skin, I'll use the white. But it is good to have kind of a wide range of color correctors. There's also pink color corrector, turquoise color corrector, violet color corrector, but like a fair violet. So just depending on what you need, you can buy every color under the rainbow here. So I mixed in some violet color corrector with both of those foundation shades. The light shade on its own would be too fair on her, which would end up leaning kind of gray. And the darker one is too golden, which would really clash with the cool tones in her skin. So the way I like to apply foundation really on anybody is I put some on the back of my hand. I use one brush to apply where I want it, and then I take a different brush that's clean, that has no product on it, and I blend it out. So you'll see I'm grabbing a small brush here to apply the product, then taking the other brush to blend it out. Very small layers is required for achieving this really skin-like texture. This foundation is a silicone-based foundation similar to how, say, Giorgio Armani Luminous Silk is, except I feel like there's a little bit more of a grip to this one. It's not too slippery, and the coverage, I would say, is more medium. You can sheer it way down, and you can also use other products in conjunction with it to make it more of a fuller coverage. It's my holy grail foundation that I've had in my kit for years. I use it on so many different types of skin. It just gives you that really nice, just smooth, blurred out, really pretty look to the skin. Another one of my favorite foundations that I keep in my kit is the Dior Forever Backstage Face and Body Makeup, if I'm saying that right. So those two plus a couple of cream foundations is what I'm typically keeping in my kit. So here I'm just going through, blending into the hairline. I have basically no product on my brush at this point. I am just blending edges out. I use a mixture of stippling and kind of sweeping motions just to blend everything evenly. Now we're going to go in with the concealer that I primarily use for under the eye area because it's a liquid, long wearing. It self sets. It's the MAC Pro Long Wear concealer, which I've carried in my kit for years and years and years now. And I do a tiny bit on the eye. If you ever see any videos that I'm doing a full eye look, which I'm not on her here, we were actually kind of short for time. We actually had her record her doing makeup on me after this, and she already had her brows filled in a bit and mascara on, so I told her don't worry about taking any of that off. I will work around it. But if you do ever see me doing any videos where I'm doing a full eye look, I will prep the whole lid with this concealer, a very thin amount. And that typically is enough for me for a under shadow base. I do carry the Danessa Myricks cream color fix in the nudes in my kit as well, but I honestly go back to the techniques I've used for years and years and years, which is using this Pro Longwear concealer for the eye area. So I really only used it under the eye. Now I'm moving on to a small palette that I've made for Kryolan Dermacolor. I have the full large kit of the Kryolan Dermacolor, but it's massive and it would take up half the room in my kit. So I've depotted it into this Artist Kit Company small palette. I think it's the palette 1.0. And here I am mixing a couple of tones on the back of my hand and going into color correct some of her redness areas around the nose and the chin. This on its own is a very, very highly pigmented concealer and should be used fairly judiciously. It's got a lot of coverage to it and it can really load up pretty fast. So I'm using a very tiny brush to apply where I want it, and the same technique as I did with the foundation, where I'm taking a different brush that has no product on it and I'm blending it out. You can also tap it out with the tip of your finger. My nails are too long to do that right now, but that is also another technique that I like to do. If you love a beauty blender, this is a good time to get that out and use that to blend. Everybody has their own way of painting, so there's not really a wrong way to do this here. It's just more of what you are more comfortable with and what you just like to use more. So for me, that's brushes. I just don't really use a lot of the beauty blenders. Sometimes I'll carry the single-use little triangle sponges in my kit. Those are also really good for applying powders, but I typically just opt for brushes. So here I am just blending. Like I said before, I have almost nothing on this brush at this point. It's just blending out what's kind of already on the face, making sure none of my edges are visible, and just making sure I have that nice, clean, solid canvas before moving on to blush. This is the Makeup Forever, I think it's called the Skin Essentials palette. This is in the medium, I believe. So I'm using a kind of a cooler tone pink, which I could get away with using just that on her, but I wanted a tiny bit of warmth, so I mixed in with one of the corals that's also in this palette. But the cool tone pink alone would have been fine. I'm just going so sheer with it here that I don't really want it to look like a lot of blush has been applied. I want it to more so look like that's her own color in her skin coming through. She does kind of have a little bit more redness in the face, which is pretty normal. Most people have some redness in the face, but once you correct all of that with foundation and concealer, you do need to go back in and add some of that color back into the face with blush and later with some either very soft contouring or a little bit of bronzer to give back some life into the face, whereas using foundations and concealers can just turn everything all one note and give it, no dimension. So you'll want to work some of that dimension back in with color, with highlighter, with foundation, or with contour and bronzer. So I start with the blush. It's a cream blush, so I haven't done any powdering on her yet. Cream blush over foundation is going to look the most skin-like. Once you put the blush on, then I like to go in after that with a little bit of the bronzer. This is personal preference. A lot of people like to do bronzers first or contouring first and then go in with the blush. I like to do the blush first because I'm so minimal with the contouring that I want to see that color on the face first because that will give it some life before I go in and see where I need to shape. So I've mixed a couple of those colors onto the back of my hand. They're going to lean way too orange on her, so I'm using a bit of the violet corrector again. This is also a good place where you could even use the blue corrector to turn those colors a little bit more grayer. You can use a little bit of a green corrector in there. Depends on what kind of shade you're trying to turn those corrector colors into. So on her, I'm not really wanting this to look like I've added product, but I want it to look like her face has dimension. So very, very thin layers. I have kind of a softer, denser brush that's a little bit, it's kind of got a little bit of an angle to it, but very soft. And that is what I'm using to sort of pack in the color. It's soft enough to also blend it back out, but you can kind of pack it on there because it's dense, but then the shape of the brush itself is it's got a really nice soft angle to it, so it's easy to blend it out. This is where I start to powder. So this is the Laura Mercier translucent powder. I have it on a little puff. I get these puffs on Amazon for super cheap, but it's a little terry cloth makeup puff, powder puff. So the trick with powdering, there's a bunch of different ways that you can powder. The technique I'm using basically is really sort of packing it in. So you put some of the powder onto the puff and then you kind of rub the puff together into itself to get it to work deeper into those fibers. And then you roll it over the places that you want that powder to go, and that will make it melt more into the foundation underneath versus if you're just going in with a brush and then it kind of sits on top. So with the puff, you're kind of pressing it into the face more and it's blending in with that foundation underneath. So I do that first, and then I take a little bit more on my brush and I'm just sweeping the rest of it through the face. So she has some more oily areas on the chin, through the center of the face, the inner cheek. So that's where I was pressing it in with the puff, and then I go back through with the brush and I blend it out. This is one of my favorite little palettes that I got on Amazon. It's a Korean beauty brand. It's called I'm Meme. The brand is I'm Meme, and it is the afternoon tea palette. It's the very fair olive undertoned contour palette, and I love it for my really fair girls. It's super soft. The texture is nice. It's not a very expensive palette. A lot of these Korean beauty brands have lots of very sheer and olive undertoned products for that demographic. So it's good to keep something like that in your kit. I use this palette all the time. It's also really pretty on the eyes. So I've gone back through and contoured her slightly. Now I'm going in with a little bit of powder blush just to brighten up the cheeks a bit. This is an optional stage. I typically do this though just to sort of reinforce the blush that's under there to kind of set everything. And I do like to work with some different types of powders in the skin, on the top of the skin, even though I'm very light-handed with everything. Layering products and using very thin layers of each of these different textures of products like creams and powders and liquids, you can really get this multi-dimensional look to the skin once you're all done. So it's matters in what order you apply everything and how much you apply of each of these products. So the very last step that I'm really doing here is taking the ambient light, or the Hourglass ambient light palette. This is the light one, and I'm very softly going over basically her whole face, but really kind of sticking to sort of the higher points of the face, the chin, the nose, the cheeks, up around the brow bone, avoiding the very center of the forehead. I even think I go across the eyes a little bit. It's got a nice sheen to it. It looks good on pretty much all skin tones. It doesn't have a heavy shimmer to it. So because I don't want her to look unfinished, I'm filling her brows in a bit, because even though she had them filled in slightly before I started her makeup, we kind of, rubbed some of it off, and I'm just going back in with some Viseart eyeshadows. I've depotted them into a palette here, but it's actually the Viseart Brow and Contour palette. So I'm just going in and just giving her back some shape into the brow. Like I said, this isn't really a very full face makeup look. I'm not doing much on the eyes, but this would be a really pretty everyday look for anybody. I mean, the skin looks really good. It doesn't look like a lot of heavy makeup. The brows are lightly filled in. There's some blush, there's some shape on the face, some contouring, some highlighting. Everything just looks very clean. This would be a really good look if you are, say, a commercial model and you need to arrive on set looking camera ready. This would be a good look for you. This would be a good look if you're getting corporate photos done. You could really just add a little bit of mascara to this. She has mascara on, so that's the only other thing that I would probably be doing here. And throughout this video, I would add a little bit to her eyes. So I did add the concealer to the eyes. I slightly added a little bit of that really light Korean Beauty contour kit to the eye, just for a little bit of shape and color. And then I added a tiny bit of that Hourglass palette to the eye as well. So here in this last part of the video, I didn't want to leave her lips with nothing, so I'm just adding a little bit. I didn't have my whole kit out. I only had little parts of my kit, so I'm just adding a little bit of the light pink from the Makeup Forever Skin Essentials palette, and that's really the very last step. So if I felt like digging out more of my kit, I probably would have done a little bit of a different color on her, but I think the light pink looks pretty. And then the last step, I'm just setting with the One Size Powder Melt Setting Spray. If you wanted to really waterproof this look or sweat proof it, there are other steps that you can do in the skin prep, as well as powdering or using different setting sprays at the end. So this is it. This is my finished look for how to get skin to look like skin on my best friend Christy, and I hope you really enjoyed this. I will see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.